Yes, yes. Welcome to the ancient world of tabletop games. I am Agamemnon from the historical documentary Time Bandits. This is a report from a fugitive. If you are running an adventure, why do you need to hide information from the rest of the players in a role-playing game? There's no straightforward answer. I can give you the obvious answer, but there are reasons beyond the obvious. Let's dive behind the cardboard screen. For the uninitiated, a role-playing game is run by one player for the other players. The Game Master or GM in so many games, the referee, the Dungeon Master or DM in Dungeons & Dragons, the keeper of arcane lore from the Call of Cthulhu, the administrator in a game of Top Secret. This person is also a player. But the GM doesn't play one character. The GM plays the cast of thousands in this tabletop movie extravaganza. And the weather, also the cutlery, the explosions, those city streets, that feather floating in the direction of the sewer. And the sewer. The GM plays those goblins, and if those goblins fall off the cliff, then the GM plays the cliff, and the stunt goblins who stand in for the actual goblins during the landing into the off-screen crash mat. A role-playing game is just as much description and dialogue as it is Dungeons & Dragons. If it's all about description, about information, why hide that information behind a screen? Role-playing games call for roles, I mean characters, and roles, I mean the rolling of dice. Gaming, and above all these, hovers a story. It is up to the GM to furnish the skeleton of that story. The players flesh out the direction and pacing of the plot as they go. At worst, this creates a lumpen Frankensteinian beast of a tale, but at best, frankly, it's fucking amazing. The format is straightforward. Our game master buys or writes an adventure for a game with a particular setting and rules. This adventure contains the plot outline, obstacles, potential twists, villains, maps, a timeline, all sorts of goodies. Players work through this improvised maze to reach the centre of their own communal handcrafted destiny, with a nudge or three from the dice using the rules to shine light upon the chaos. It is poor form to borrow from spy fiction and read the GM's adventure upside down across the table. The solution is to provide a cardboard screen that blocks one end of the table from view. I've now given you the obvious answer to the opening question. Thanks for watching. But wait a bit. There's more to the GM's screen than keeping the adventure from spoiling under the withering gaze of your players. If you are lucky, an official role-playing game screen is bundled with an adventure or other bonus material. Even if the GM writes adventures, getting hold of a published adventure is always a good thing, especially for beginning players. Experienced gamers, sore pressed for time, buy adventures for the convenience. Inexperienced gamers want to see how to set an adventure down in print. You should try commercial products. Then you can branch out into writing your own adventures with a rough idea of what to expect. That wasn't my experience. I wrote and ran adventures for one borrowed game system before buying an entirely different system that I then bought commercial adventures for, and I wrote additional scenes for those commercial products to make them more playable, particularly at the opening of each story. I'm looking at you, Cthulhu, with your dear famous investigator chat-up line. If you are starting out in the RPG world, play the game's basic adventure, the one that comes with the rulebook, unless the designers skimped on that essential or just run the adventure that's almost always bundled with the GM screen. 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons roars up and down the trail it blazed with 3 rulebooks and no adventure. See the starter set for how it's done if you hanker for fantasy adventuring. For countless centuries, the Call of Cthulhu rulebook came with an adventure inside its pages. This puzzling adventure lasted through most of the book's many editions, but that is a blasphemous thing about which I dare not speak. They moved it to the free Quick Start guide for 7th edition. Run official products, buy official adventures and gut them, tailor them to the gaming style of your players. Write your own mad adventures and hide them behind a screen. The screen serves many arcane purposes. Outwardly, official screens carry artwork in keeping with the game's themes, adding to the atmosphere or reminding scatterbrained players which game is on the table. Also, the day of the week. And that is a role-playing fact. A few screens carry game rules, charts and reference materials on the outside to assist players. In my experience, players rarely look at that stuff. They have their own character sheets and other players to contend with. The inside of the screen is covered in game rules, diagrams, ley lines, and a summary of the law and contracts pertaining to devils, demons, subdemons, demigods, and semi-demi-quavers. The experienced GM wallpapers over the useless charts, blue-tacking essential paper reference sheets to the cardboard wall, or employing the fabled magic built into paper clips of holding. Why hide things behind the screen? To conceal the adventure notes, or lack thereof. I've attended a few gaming clubs. Meal times at a club throw all sorts of random encounters at you. I stayed seated running one game. A few players were hived off from the main action, separated in another part of the adventure. They decided to grab a bite to eat at the shops. This was okay. They'd be there and back again in no time, and they wouldn't hold up proceedings by their absence. On the other side of the gaming cavern, a game of D&D unfurled with many a crash and bang, action-packed compared to my modest adventure. Players returned with supplies, passing the D&D game as they feasted on the move, and we were told on the way home that the guy running the action movie across from us had nothing behind his screen but dice. The pencil he waved was just for show. He didn't make notes of damage dished out to his villains or anything like that. The guy winged the whole thing and flew away. Yes, there were figures and floor plans. He was lucky the players didn't backtrack through rooms they'd already visited, long since swept off the table to make room for the fresher parts of the dungeon. Might be awkward reconstructing a made-up dungeon map from memory. With the right players, they wouldn't even notice. They fought the ultimate made-up dragon with its ultimate made-up statistics, and its ultimate made-up vitality ultimately crept down to nothing, giving victory to the made-up characters. His real players enjoyed made-up proceedings, and I feel that's what counts in the end, even though rookie game masters might reel in horror from my telling of this anecdote. Just yesterday there he was, wandering the supermarket aisles. I hadn't seen him in years. In gaming terms, that's what you call a random encounter. Occasionally, the GM screen hides nothing instead of something. With edible supplies laid out on the table, the sly GM would deliberately taunt players by lifting prized morsels from behind the screen, the private stash of sugary goodies suddenly revealed for comedy purposes. A giant can monster hisses and prepares to drown the dungeoneers in a wave of brown fizzy liquid. Glug, glug, glug. The screen is a dumping ground for notes from players. A player wants to ask a question but has a secret scheme in mind and just can't say whatever it is flat out loud. This causes notitis, an outbreak of note writing, sneaking fiendish plans over the cardboard wall. And it goes like this. Player 1 writes a note, throws it over the screen. GM reads note, nods, or says yes, consults a rulebook, scribbles a reply, and now, notitis. Second player sees first player writing a note, thinks, I'll have some of that. Writes note, third player spots this, first player hastily scribbles second note. Notes fly over the screen, GM nods to a player, says yes to a second player, tells the third player to fuck off. Everyone laughs, a new round of notitis begins. Yes, the screen conceals the detail in notes passed back and forth. In the case of players who are physically incapable of rolling dice and keeping them on the table, the screen provides the ultimate barrier. Roll your dice off that way, and there's a 90% chance that the dice avoid the floor. As soon as one player does it, another player chips in, and before long your screen is a bowling alley or crazy golf course. Players jokingly declare outrageous rolls, knowing you'll have to stand and peer over the cardboard wall to see the results. A player idly wonders what it would take to knock a screen over with a die roll. I'll speak of something else concerning screens shortly, and from direct experience. First, though, I'll admit I wasn't there for this one. The next story was told to me by a player present at the scene and not 15th hand the way most gaming tales are passed on. A screen is rarely a shield for the tired game master. Players gathered around the table with the GM at one end in the position of despair. Activate the shields, Mr. Sulu. The GM buried his head behind the screen, deep in contemplation of the adventure. That shouldn't have lasted more than a minute, for a minute of inactivity is a long time around the gaming table. Players waited for an explanation of the rules or a return to adventuring. They drifted into banter that wasn't game-related. Inactivity passed from 1 minute to 5 minutes. Hark! A sound from behind the screen. snoring. The GM fell asleep running an adventure. How tired do you have to be, or how tired and bored, or how crap do you have to be to fall asleep at the wheel when running a dungeon? What else does a screen hide? Bullshit dice. Players are planning. Oh, they are always planning in councils of war and, on occasion, in councils of peace. Schemes are underway, the chase is on, the game's afoot, and this is all part of the game. Except plans fizzle out and players turn to talk of other things. The experienced GM reaches for plastic objects and rolls those dice in secret, very publicly, behind that screen, making a note on the adventure. Hawk-like, players focus attention on what just didn't happen. What's happening? Oh, nothing. Smirk. We keep an eye out for ambushes. I don't trust the rogue. Suddenly, the game's pace picks up. Attention is back on track. What did I roll the dice for? To get players back on track. That's all. And the screen conceals that tactic every bloody time. Players are so rooted in the dreaded D&D random encounter that they fear a random encounter is about to hit them, even if this is a game of Cthulhu with no random encounters to worry about. In Cthulhu, worry about the deliberate encounters. You'll never need to use random encounters, but that's a separate issue. And now, an example of the screen's importance in hiding things. This channel owes its existence to the Canadian author Karen Woodward. In one of our writerly conversations, she casually mentioned her interest in games, but she didn't know where to start. Was I familiar with any of that stuff? Foolishly, I said I was. She politely mugged me for information and pretty much told me to start a YouTube channel about gaming. And here we are. I subjected her to a game of Cthulhu, and she was never the same after that. One of our talks concentrated on players and information, which led to the retelling of this anecdote. People want character and story and atmosphere and drama from an RPG. Though there are the other people who just want to batter the bejesus out of things. Roll lots of dice and go, "Rah! Damage! Rah! Kill the goblin!" Meanwhile, the rest of us are engaged in banter, witty or otherwise. Karen raised a point. She wondered, do you think it's more fun if you play a game and you have these two distinct types of personalities running side by side, for the players? Or is it more fun if everybody is more into the narrative alone, as opposed to the players who are into the dungeon bashing by itself? Kill the princess! Save the dragon! Who has the most fun? Depends on the setting. In a game like D&D, with its wargaming origins, it often played out as combat-heavy. The game relied on that grinding mentality that developed out of role-playing games and found its way into computer games. There are plenty of opportunities to escape from that grind and dig into story and drama that's emotional conflict and not actual physical thumping. There's room for both broad categories of player type inside the same crowded cavern, or busy tavern. This discussion led us to talk of use and abuse of knowledge in the game. And here, there's a relevant piece on the function of the Gamemaster'S screen. This was D&D though, so that had to be a Dungeonmaster'S screen. We sat down to play a game at a club with a whole bunch of new players. 2 of them played RPGs, but they hadn't played D&D before. They didn't know any of the creatures. Every monster was a mystery. In a club setting, you'll see 2 long, thin tables shoved together to accommodate a large party of dungeoneers. And there'll be that side table for all the figures and floor plans. The setup is the same the world over. DM at one end behind the screen, players scattered around the table in no particular order, bunched up or stretched out as the mood took them. Here the DM must be careful. If you reach to the side table for more cardboard maps and you hold dice in your hand as you rise from the chair, you risk giving information to experienced gamers as your dice appear above the screen. The screen hides your dice. And I'm not talking about the results of those rolls. I mean the number of dice to hand and the type held. We had a supernaturally experienced D&D player up against an equally experienced DM, and this led to a battle of wits over information. First, the DM used generic figures for the villains and gave vague descriptions of the creatures that emerged from the cavern depths. If you sit a beholder figure on the table, players may take the hint that they are up against a beholder. We'd often see at least one dragon slapped down in a beginner dungeon just for a laugh. Encounter with a beastie. Hazy description of that beastie. A figure lands on the table. It's just a general monster model, but the DM stands to put the figure in place. The dungeon notes are out of sight, yet the dice held in one hand form a combination used to power up a specific creature's special attack. The experienced player knows this. How? Sorcery. Ritual sacrifice at midnight over a demonic character sheet. We don't know how. The joke was that certain players worshipped the DM's guide in a shrine in one corner of the room. Upshot? Thinly veiled advice would come from that player. Those new players had no clue. Here's where we get into information again. You as the player gain knowledge from game mechanics that you as your character don't have access to. Now you might pass this information off as tavern rumours and glints of lore picked up from previous adventures. In this case, just staring at dice and learning stuff, it was clearly bullshit. We played the game. And the two new players, utterly clueless, found the clued-up nature of the game annoying. So they did something about it. They ran on ahead. Unthinkable for experienced players who wouldn't risk so rash an action. At that point, cut off from support, the runaway characters found the adventure became far more interesting for all the wrong reasons. They would dash into a room in this tunnel network and say, "What's that?" "I don't know, I'm not fighting it," and they'd run on. Made a change. "I don't know what that is, I'm just going to bash it." Well, they didn't even want to bash it, they just ran from it. "I'm not fighting that." These two mad fools went through the dungeon like a dose of salts. They'd rush up to a door and throw the door open. "What's in there?" The door creaks open. You see a horrible creature. "No, screw that. Slam. Next. Run on." Karen laughed at this anecdote and said to me, "But you have to admit, that is the sort of rational approach." I hadn't played terribly much of the game myself, so my view was a bit different. I think I know what the creature is. I don't know. But there were other players who were all about just going in and bashing things, and they knew those creatures back to front. The vaguest description turned those players into slot machines. You saw the jackpot clicking into place reel by reel over the eyes. Experienced players knew the powers, abilities, spell effects that their inexperienced characters had no clue about. They'd just know what the monster had for breakfast, while the rest of us wondered if we were even staring at a monster. How do you know that creature's family tree from almost no description? And this one player just knew the monster's bank details, based on nothing, a hunch, gut, instinct, sorcery, and a demonic pact, or so we thought. Well, by this time we're walking along through a dungeon stirred out of its slumber, and we're mopping up all the creatures that the first two players unleashed, having opened all the doors and run on. At least those two buffoons had a narrative of sorts. In the mass battle that followed in their wake, we all became the non-narrative loving bashers. Talking about knowledge in games and hiding it from players, there was a different experience going on way up at the sharp end of the running sequences. The DM didn't have to hide a thing from the two loons who were running through the game, opening doors and stuff. He could tell them anything, give them a full description straight out of the monster manual, and they'd be none the wiser. But he was trying to hide it from the experienced player who knew everything from previous games. All the strengths, weaknesses, how to tackle the beast's special abilities. So these two space cadets run on through the entire dungeon, dodging all the creatures thrown at them, and way behind them we have very strange battles. It's party night down in the dungeon. Bring your own weapons. Forge wonderful new evil alliances and throw unusual combinations at the players. Chaotic, brutal, intense. A story of sorts rose out of this mess. May you live in interesting times. What happens next? Eventually our heroes reach a room with a difference. They burst in through the door as usual and encounter tapestries, an epic bed, scantily clad women, and they think, yes, we'll stop here. They don't think this is unusual or a trap or anything like that at all. And they go, ladies, you won't believe the time we've had. We've just been fighting and running from monsters. Mostly running from monsters. No, we fought them. Fighting and running from monsters. Mostly we fought them. We fought them. We were brave, manly men. So, what are you doing in here? Eating you, my dear. That was the scene, and we're coming along behind them and fighting this huge crowd of random creatures who've all teamed up. Monsters come out of their bedrooms, corridors and hallways after being disturbed by these two idiots. We fight our way through the horde as a team or not at all. So yes, we fight as a team. Almost. One guy squeezes ahead and finally bursts in, reconnecting and catching up with these two. It's not really the done thing in that kind of combat-heavy situation. If you're separated from everyone else, then you've had it. When a party of adventurers heads into the dungeon, never split the party. Inexperienced players dart all over the place, as if they're in a slasher movie heading for the cellar before the opening credits finished rolling. No, never split the party, if you're in the party. But if you're the DM and the party splits, the DM is perfectly entitled to rip stragglers to shreds. In this adventure, there were so many players that the injuries were distributed without killing anyone. Sheer luck. A bold player walks into the room. He sees the fancy bed, all the scantily clad women having a party by this time. Well, it's D&D, so he thinks it's an illusion, and he disbelieves it, as that's something you can do in D&D. In a game about the imagination, you can declare disbelief. He said, "I disbelieve this illusion." And he was given a roll to disbelieve. He made the die roll so powerfully that the whole illusion was dispelled and popped out of existence. There's an old stone bench, and there aren't any scantily clad women. No party food. Wine, women, and song? Well, the players were the only ones singing. The illusory food and drink wouldn't sustain the players. Eventually they'd have died of thirst, or monsters would have come in on routine checks and slaughtered the players in an ambush. Party pooper. It's a character class in D&D. Honest. Our new players were very upset at this guy. Yes, they were very upset, so they stabbed the party pooper. He disbelieved the illusion, but he couldn't believe they'd do that to him. Disbelief is a dangerous thing. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? We were having a fantastic time with these women, and you've just burst our bubble. Stab. It was one of the funniest things. We caught up with them as the stabbing happened and sat there and laughed and laughed. That's an example of players who had no knowledge, and they just went in thinking we don't know what's going on. Other, more experienced players used game knowledge to deal with creatures and their special powers. Getting that knowledge balance right in the RPG world is difficult. It grows easier with more games under your belt. The rookies survived, and they had more fun on their mad dash, gave us more to laugh at too than if they'd stayed with us. No harm done, besides the mass slaughter of monsters and an unexpected stabbing. The screen hides a multitude of sins, and the odd biscuit. A screen hides dice with good reason. When it comes to adventure notes or a professional adventure, the screen hides everything. Published adventures are illustrated, and it is wise indeed to hide a plot-based illustration behind that cardboard shield. You may just manage to hide the exact section of the rules you're consulting. When it comes to maps, a few games go out of the way, that extra mile, to provide a map for players and a more detailed map for the GM. A GM map that shows secret passages, say. And a well-worn screen holds something special on the inside. Drink stains and sprays from all those times the players made the GM laugh while neck-deep in a cup of juice, the fabled potion of rehydration. Rarely there'll be blood stains, not from actual combat. Unless you count a battle with sharp-edged paper sheets as a war with the villainous paper-cut tribe. The space behind the screen is for dice, a character sheet from the game being played, the adventure, a rulebook or two, food and drink, a few figures waiting to jump onto the other side of the screen in ambush, and anything else that proves useful in gameplay, props, mini-maps, sketches, tokens. I've left something to the end. Transparency in die rolls. When the players are asked to roll dice, the results of those rolls are always public knowledge, but the player behind the screen, the GM, rolls dice in secret. Why? To conceal special abilities. Characters may know the creature and see that you are rolling wildly different dice. You've secretly merged two creatures to build a hybrid beast just for variety. That's why the dice are different. The screen conceals basic mechanical game cogwheels. Keep the surprises surprising. I've already covered the idea of rolling dice for no reason behind the screen, but would you set the screen aside and make the results of a die roll public? Yes, for dramatic effect. In the RPG hobby there are unwritten codes, well-worn phrases trotted out by the players as reflex actions. There should be a dungeon with monsters in it and treasure at the end of it. It's never as sick as when you fail a roll by one. I attack the gazebo. We go now. If it has hit points, we can kill it. I demand that you roll damage. In games with damage rolls and hit points, players refuse to accept overwhelming death based on a statement concerning dice. I'm rolling 15d6 for damage. You are obviously dead. The player response is always the same. I demand that you roll damage. So I agreed to roll. With a dramatic flourish, I set the screen aside and marshalled 15 six-siders for battle. Some background here. This was a game featuring characters who were superpowered Nephilim. The Nephilim characters possess human bodies and improve them slightly with possession. On top of that, if the human vessel dies, the Nephilim spirit leaves the body behind and inhabits a new form. So, for once, it didn't much matter if the character's body lived or died. The character would carry on beyond death. The damage was irrelevant. This, though, wouldn't stop the reflex action. Players still demand that you roll damage. The player stood in the road at night with a sword and tried to cut through the windscreen of the enemy car barreling straight down the street. There were rolls to avoid being hit by the car. The player failed. I said I'd be rolling 15d6 damage as the car rammed the character into a building. Nephilim characters are beyond human, but they are still hosted by a creature of flesh and blood. That amount of damage is going to cream the human host. Player activates the well-worn phrase, I demand that you roll damage. The Nephilim had a spot of magical armor. It wasn't enough. But I bowed to the time-worn phrase and set the screen aside. Players banked on my legendary ability to roll crap dice. There was no point in keeping the roll secret. The dice tumbled from my hands, and I rolled. 1, 1, 1, 2, 1. No one could believe how badly I rolled, even though they all expected me to roll abysmally. I'd outdone my own legendary reputation for rolling the worst results in RPG history. The player sliced the enemy driver in two as the car hit and crawled from the wreckage, barely alive. Other players swooped to the rescue. This was ludicrous. Games are meant to be like that. The story is propelled by the randomness of players and of dice. That had greater impact with the screen set aside. Sometimes the moment is too big to hide behind a screen. You'll know when that is, and it might be never in your games. Now there is one final topic, and it isn't of concern to me, but I must cover it. If the GM rolls dice behind the screen and the results utterly derail the adventure, what do? Fake the result and keep the game moving? That's not in question. For me, the answer is no. I'll drop rolls for no reason in there to concentrate the attention of wayward players, but that's about it. The more experienced you are at running adventures and keeping the gameplay flowing over the rough stones of the players and their choices and the awkwardness of bad rolls, the less likely it is that you'll need to fake anything. From this video, you've learned that one Dungeon Master was experienced enough to fake absolutely everything behind the screen. The only reality there was the sound of his dice hitting the table. I'd like to think beginners gain something from these videos. As a beginning Game Master, you'll find a single die roll destroys the scene, everything around that scene, and all possible actions leading out of that scene. The adventure drops dead with 4 pages of fun and games still to go. Imagine a movie that sees all the main characters drive off a cliff on the way to the villain's mansion for the final showdown. The end. In cases like that, you'll be tempted to fake it behind the screen. That's between you, your dice, and your cardboard. As you play more sessions, you'll grow to realize that the single awkward die roll does not destroy the scene, it merely transforms the possibilities. New avenues open, even from a character's death. Sometimes a game can only proceed as a reasonable story once a player character bites the dust. You won't think it when you're running your first adventure, but the potential is there for disastrous dice to generate a new plot. Players try not to grow used to their characters. If they die, there's a long list of brothers/daughters/robots who come into play to lead the cause of vengeance, and so on. I let the players tell the story, and I let the dice tell that story as well. If the dice kill player characters, that's just how the dice land. Although, I should add this, the death of a character is rarely caused by a single event. A character doesn't die purely from a player's failed roll. Think of everything that led to that point. There is rarely a single cause of an aircraft crash. Multiple factors multiply the danger. Is there such a thing as a killer Dungeon Master? The killer DM is listed in the Monster Manual. Special ability allows players to end their characters by their own stupidity. And that is the truest role-playing fact. If you can't face it, that's okay. We can always hide it behind a handy cardboard screen.